So first off, central banks. They control the money. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. They're the most powerful central bank because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. They supposedly are trying to control the markets, but if anybody thinks they can control the markets, I also have a bridge to sell them. They were trying to get this 2% inflation, and they ended up at 9%. Now they're trying to get it down, and they're crashing the entire economy. And so really, they're upside down. They are behind the 8 ball, if you will. And the reality of them doing anything about this is very, very low, the chance of them. And it says the last time the U.S. suffered a nasty bout of inflation was in the 80s. Now, that's true, but it's also false. So using the CPI metric, which is what the government puts out, the government metric, I call it CPI. Per the CPI, inflation hasn't been this bad since the 80s. The problem is it's a lie. The problem is they changed the way they calculate inflation over and over and over. And if we go back to the way they calculated it in the 80s, we're really over 20%. So first of all, that's a little bit of a lie. But back then, what they're talking about is that back then the head of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker, had to jack up rates by as much as 3 percentage points. And Volcker actually said, back then, he said, quote, unless we respond to the increase, which could be quite large in this period, we're going to have a real credibility problem. So what does he mean by that? That was in 1980. Paul Volcker said that. So unless we respond to the increase of what? The increase of inflation. Prices were out of control. Now, there's a lot of reasons why prices were out of control. Mainly because in 1971 we had gotten off the gold standard and they started printing an unlimited amount of money. If you want to see what I'm talking about, it's very simple. Any elementary kid could see this. Just pull up a price chart of gold, historical price chart of gold. And what you'll notice, for over 100 years, 200 years, gold was $20 an ounce because gold was money. Then 1933, the government seized everybody's gold and gave them the $20 for it, and then instantly revalued it to $35 an ounce. So then you can see a chart, $20, 20, 20, 20, and then all of a sudden bumped up and it's $35 an ounce. But in 1971, when we severed the ties of the gold standard, what happened to the price of gold? Well, it shot through the roof. As a matter of fact, it continued on ever since then, and I didn't pull this up in advance, but I'm going to pull it up for you right now because it's got me thinking about it. So if I look at the gold prices historical, let's look at 100 years. If my internet works with me, here we go. I got to take off the adjusted for inflation bit. So here we go. So we can see 2020, 2020, 2020, all the way, here we go, to 1933, as I said. Then it bumps up to $35 an ounce, which is where it stayed all the way until August of 1970. And then it started to jump higher. And within, let's say, 4 years, it jumped from 35 to 150. So that's what happened with the money. So why did prices get so high? Well, because they printed so much currency. Come on. So Paul Volcker had to deal with that. As a matter of fact, by the time he had to deal with it, back to this proverbial, or not proverbial, but what we're talking about, this 1980, that's where gold reached its local high of $593 per ounce. That was the inflation, or I'm sorry, 627. I had to zoom in a little bit here. Let me try and blow this up a little bit so I can see a better number. Okay, here we go. $677. Not adjusted for inflation in nominal terms. So 677. So it went from 35 to 677 in 10 years, in a decade. That's the inflation that he was trying to fight. Now, he was able to bring inflation down. And so by April of 2001, gold had fallen all the way down to about 260. So it went from 35 to almost 700, and then he was able to bring the price of gold back down, bring inflation back down to about 270. Now, how did he do it? By wrecking the economy. If you're alive in the 70s, you remember times of gas shortages and things like that. So there was no money, there was no energy. And so here we are, the Feds are faced with something similar. We have a 4-decade high, 9.1% interest, and they're trying to pretend like they're Volcker, but they're not. Where Paul Volcker was raising rates by 2-3 points at a time, they're raising rates with 0.5%. Now, maybe we'll do 0.75%. How's that, right? Now, if they were to go through with this, now potentially next week they could come out with another rate hike. Maybe it's a full point. Maybe they're going to go for a full point. A lot of people think they will. Maybe it's 1 point. Maybe it's 0.75. But if they did, that would bring the federal funds rate, their interest rate, to somewhere between 2.25 to 2.5%, which would be at least 6 percentage points below what inflation is right now. So nowhere near what Paul Volcker did back then. So we're as close to as inflation, an emergency of inflation, as anytime we've been in the past 40 years at least. And we're also seeing the biggest difference between the inflation number and the federal funds rate than we have in any point in history. So it's a pretty big deal. Now, the Fed doesn't really have any tools to fix this except for to wreck the economy. And don't worry, they're trying really hard. Now the Fed is completely stuck. They're upside down on inflation. They're pretending to be Paul Volcker and have this crazy 80s moment, but they're not. And they're not getting anywhere near with it. But the only option they have, raising rates isn't going to help them. Raising rates isn't going to fight inflation. Now, there's multiple types of inflation. It's stupid to even call it inflation. Prices go up. There's lots of prices. Which prices am I talking about? Well, there's trillions of prices. Why would they go up? Well, there's trillions of reasons. Lots of reasons. So to try to quantify it with a single number is a little bit ridiculous. But ridiculous is what government policy advisors do. So what they can do is typically, they could bring more supply into the market, which would bring the price down, or they could lower demand. And, of course, the Fed can't bring new supply, so they try to lower demand. Now, that would also involve, wrecking the economy. When they lower demand, that means people don't have the money to buy those things. Now, if they don't have the money to buy those things, that means they don't shop at your business. And if they don't shop at your business, that means you don't sell your products and goods, which means your suppliers don't get business, nor do you have money to go spend anywhere else. See how that works? It's interesting. It seems like the wrong target in my opinion, but never mind that. Thank your fearless leaders.